Hello, my name is Karina Ruiz, and I will be doing a lesson on heredity for grade level 10th in the subject of biology. The objective. So students will know how to predict the probable outcome of phenotypes in a genetic cross from the genotypes of the parents with autosomal mode of inheritance, dominant or recessive. So what is heredity? It's the passing of biological characteristics from one generation to another. For instance, consider your siblings. Show of hands, how many of you have been compared to your brother or sister? Same eyes, same hair. Yeah. So why is that? You and your siblings are getting all your genetics from the same source, your parents. This passing on of traits from parents to their offspring is through sexual reproduction, the fertilization of sperm and egg. However, this doesn't account for asexual reproduction, such as in bacteria. And here we will look at autosomal modes of inheritance, where each offspring has an equal chance of exhibiting a characteristic. So what about our genes? All our genetic information is stored in chromosomes in the form of genes. And we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. But as for the 23rd, this can be either XX, standing for female, or XY, for male. And these can be further subdivided as autosomes and sex chromosomes. A gene is a section of DNA in a specific location on a chromosome that contains information that determines a trait. So if we look at the image right here on this band, if we stretched out the DNA, we would find gene 1 and gene 2. Do you think all your physical traits are determined by one gene? Yeah, no. We have several genes, and most of the time genes are working together and contributing to a specific trait. And when there are several genes involved for just one trait, we consider this a polygenic trait, such as your height or your skin color. There are times when a single gene determines the expression of other genes, and this is considered a pleiotropic gene. However, there are singular genes that can determine a single trait. Alleles. Alleles are different variations of a gene. An individual inherits 2 alleles for each gene, one from each parent. A gene makes a protein, while alleles produce different phenotypes related to it. And phenotype is just a fancy way of saying like the physical expression of a trait. Any cell in our body that is not a sex cell, sperm, or egg are considered somatic cells. These are diploid, holding 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent. But what does this all have to do with the expression of a trait? Well, we can't really talk about that without talking about Gregor Mendel, and this European monk conducted experiments on pea plants that he cultivated in his monastery's garden, and observed how traits such as shape and color were passed down from one generation to the next. Before, in the early 1800s, it was thought that you were a blend of your parents' traits, but as you can see, it's not that simple. By knowing the alleles of the parents, we can get an idea of the likelihood a child will express a certain trait, and we will know the possible genotype combinations and thus knowing the probable phenotypes. Okay, so 7 purebred traits that Mendel had looked at are things such as whether the seed was round or wrinkled, yellow or green. And by crossing certain purebred pea plants, such as a cross between tall and short, we saw that the first generation were all tall. And Mendel started picking up on these like this relationship, and in such that it is considered dominance, where one allele is masking or overriding the effect of a different allele variant of the same gene on the other copy of the chromosome. So when all of them showed up as tall, we can see that tall is masking the short allele, even though we know it should be there. Recessive refers to a type of allele which will not be manifested in an individual unless 2 identical copies of the allele are present. So to help us out, we use a Punnett square. So this is a great tool to predict the offspring's probability of having a characteristic based on the parent's genotypes. And for the setup, the parent's genotypes are placed on the outside of the square, while in the inside of the square we see the possible offspring genotypes. Dominant alleles are often denoted by a capital letter, while a recessive allele by a lowercase. So what does it mean to be homozygous? It means having 2 identical alleles of a particular gene. What about heterozygous? Yeah, so it's just 2 different alleles instead. So where can we see this? in terms of being homozygous. Yeah, in the P generation cross, we could see two examples, big P, small p. And what about heterozygous? Yeah, so we could see it in the F1 generation, a big P, small p, and then when we're doing the cross, we could see a big P, big P, small p. Looking further, so let's do a cross ourselves, and we will start off with the first square. So we see what's on top. We have a big T, and then on the side we have another big T. So we have homozygous. Big T means it's dominant. Homozygous is dominant. So what phenotype would we expect? Yeah, so we should expect it to be tall. Okay, we got that. What about number 2? We have a big T and a small t, and that gives us, yeah, heterozygous. And do you think it'll be tall or short? Yeah, in this case, it's going to be tall. And same case for number 3, big T, small t, heterozygous, tall. And the fourth one, we see 2 small t's, which is homozygous, dwarf. And we notice that the phenotypes are in a 3-to-1 ratio, while the genotypes are in a 1-to-2-to-1 ratio. And this is an example of the law of dominance that Mendel created. So it basically says that an organism with alternate forms of a gene will express the form that is dominant. Thus, that in a heterozygote, one trait will conceal the presence of another trait for the same characteristic. So it really just takes one big T to decide whether it's going to be tall or display a phenotype of being tall or short. However, there are exceptions to this law, in which there is codominance. Both are equally displayed, such as here. Red is not more dominant than white, so we see both of them displayed equally. While in incomplete dominance, we just see a completely new phenotype form, where we see the red and pink blend and make pink. Okay, first example. So we have a dominant allele for black fur and a recessive allele for brown fur. So we already know the genotypes of the parents. Please give the possible genotypes in the genotypic ratio in that order provided right there in your breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back. So first quadrant, we see big B, small b, right? How about the second one? Yeah, same thing. How about the third one? 2 small b's. How about the last one? Also 2 small b's. So what are possible genotypes? As we can see, we have only gotten 2, so we have a big B, small b, and 2 small b's. How about genotypic ratio? We didn't get any 2 big B's, so we don't have to include it. So our genotypic ratio is 2-to-2, which might as well be reduced to 1-to-1 ratio. 50-50%. Phenotypic ratio, same thing. 50-50% chance we'll get a dog with black fur, and a 50% chance we will get 2 dogs with brown fur. Yeah. So which genotype is an example of being homozygous? Yeah, 2 small b's. What about heterozygous? A big B, small b. Yeah. Okay, we've gone this far. So I would want you to complete another Punnett square where the mother is heterozygous for brown eyes and the father is homozygous dominant for brown eyes, and give the genotypic ratio, phenotypic ratio, and circle what applies to the genotypes below. Okay, so we see that we have 2 big B's, big B, small b, big B, big B, big B, small b, and the genotypic ratio? Yeah, so we have another 1-to-1, where we have a 50% chance of getting a big B, 50% chance of getting a big B, small b. And the phenotypic ratio? So here we get 100% brown eyes, chances of getting a brown eyes for the offspring. All right, circle what applies. So we have 2 big W's. They're both the same, so we know it's, yeah, homozygous. And since they're capitalized, dominant. What about the next one? two of the same, homozygous. Small, then they're recessive. How about the third one? Yeah, so all we could say is that it's heterozygous. Okay, so that completes our lesson. If there's any questions, let me know. And I want you to start thinking about why we separated two groups into autosomes and sex chromosomes. And hopefully this will give you an idea that about next week, where we will talk about sex-linked traits. Okay, thank you for listening.